Some medieval nuns were master brewers, using garden-grown hops and herbs to make ale, not just for drinking, but as a safe alternative to often contaminated water. A convent garden wasn't just pretty. It was a high-stakes pharmacy where a misidentified plant could be the difference between a cure and a poison. Nuns meticulously documented their plant knowledge, creating illustrated manuscripts that became vital medical texts long before printed herbals were common. The serene patterns of a cloister garden were designed as a memory palace, helping nuns memorize scriptures and prayers through specific plants and pathways. Beyond herbs and vegetables, the flowers in a convent garden weren't just for show. Their colors and types were rich with Christian symbolism, turning the garden into a living book of faith. Number 11. The Secret Physic Garden. You can still visit in Barcelona. Welcome to the Monasterio de Pedralbes in Barcelona, Spain. This place isn't just an old building, it's a time capsule, and hidden within its ancient Gothic walls is a medieval medicinal garden that feels like stepping back 700 years. Founded in 1327 by Queen Alessandra de Moncada for Poor Clare nuns, this monastery was a world unto itself. The Queen even had her own palace built right next to it so she could be close to the spiritual life. And after her husband, King James II of Aragon, died, she moved in permanently, though not as a nun. The garden here, specifically the Physic Garden, is a careful reconstruction based on historical texts and archaeological findings. Imagine nuns in their habits, moving quietly among raised beds, tending to plants that were their entire pharmacy. They grew things like rosemary, sage, thyme, lavender, and valerian. Rosemary wasn't just for roast chicken back then. It was thought to improve memory and was used in remedies for colds and headaches. Sage, whose name comes from the Latin salvare, meaning to save or to heal, was a cure-all, used for everything from digestive issues to cleaning teeth. The layout of these medieval gardens was often very structured. Think neat, orderly beds, sometimes arranged in symbolic patterns. The Pedralbes garden reflects this, with distinct areas for different types of plants. There would have been a section for culinary herbs, another for medicinal plants, and perhaps even a small area for flowers used in church decorations or for their symbolic meaning. The Poor Clares were an enclosed order, meaning they rarely left the monastery walls. So this garden wasn't just a source of practical necessities. It was their connection to the natural world, a place for work, and a space that provided the ingredients for their acts of charity in healing the sick. Today, visiting this garden gives you a real sense of that enclosed, self-sufficient life. The air is often fragrant with herbs, and the sounds of the city outside seem to fade away, replaced by the buzzing of bees and the rustle of leaves, much like it might have been centuries ago. Number 10. Hildegard's Green Pharmacy brought back to life. Deep in Germany, at Eibingen Abbey near Rüdesheim am Rhein, you can find a garden inspired by one of history's most remarkable women, Hildegard von Bingen. Now, Hildegard, who lived in the 12th century, wasn't just a nun. She was a Benedictine abbess, a writer, composer, philosopher, mystic, visionary, and medical writer. She wrote extensively about the healing properties of plants, animals, and stones in her works, like Physica and Causae et Curae. So while the original gardens she tended at Rupertsberg or Eibingen might be long gone or altered, the modern herb garden at the current Eibingen Abbey, a community founded in the early 20th century in her tradition, is a living tribute to her knowledge. This garden is meticulously planted with species described in Hildegard's texts. she wrote about hundreds of plants. For example, she championed fennel for good digestion and eyesight, noting it could make a person joyful. She recommended lavender for calming the nerves and warding off evil spirits, which could have meant anything from bad moods to actual infections, given its antiseptic properties. Galangal, a relative of ginger, was another favorite, praised for its power against heart pain and stomach ailments. She even wrote about plants like pellitory, which she suggested for toothaches, and hyssop for coughs. The garden at Eibingen aims to educate visitors about Hildegard's holistic approach to health, where the physical, spiritual, and natural worlds were deeply interconnected. Walking through it, you'll see labels explaining what Hildegard wrote about each plant. It's not a vast, sprawling estate garden, but rather a focused collection, much like a medieval physic garden would have been, practical, organized, and packed with purpose. The Benedictine nuns who follow Hildegard's path today continue to study her works, and the garden serves as a tangible link to her teachings. It's a place that shows how ancient wisdom about natural healing was cultivated and preserved within convent walls, with women like Hildegard acting as pioneering herbalists and doctors of their time. Number 9. Where English nuns walked among roses and herbs. Lilcock Abbey in Wiltshire, England has a Hollywood famous cloister. Think Harry Potter scenes. But before it became a grand country home and a movie star, it was an Augustinian nunnery. Founded in 1232 by Ella, Countess of Salisbury, this place was home to a community of nuns for over 300 years. And at the heart of any medieval nunnery or monastery was the cloister garden. The cloister garth, the square or rectangular open space, enclosed by covered walkways, was more than just a pretty patch of green. For the nuns of Laycock, this would have been a central part of their daily life. It was a place for quiet contemplation, for reading religious texts, and for some light cultivation. While the main physic and kitchen gardens would have been located elsewhere in the precincts, the cloister garden itself often contained symbolic plants, fragrant herbs, and perhaps a central well or fountain representing the water of life. Roses were common, not just for their beauty and scent, but also for their religious symbolism, often associated with the Virgin Mary, the rose without thorns. Today, the gardens at Lacock Abbey are a mix of historical styles, reflecting its later life as a private residence, particularly the home of William Henry Fox Talbot, a pioneer of photography. However, the cloister garth remains, and efforts have been made to suggest its monastic origins. You can walk those same stone paths where nuns once paced in prayer. Imagine them tending to lavender, its scent filling the air and used to freshen linens, or as a calming remedy. They might have grown chamomile for teas to aid sleep, or pot marigolds, calendula, whose petals were used in ointments for skin complaints, and also as a food coloring, giving a golden hue to bras. The atmosphere in the cloister, even now, is one of peace and seclusion. While the specific medieval planting scheme is a reimagining, the space itself is authentically ancient, offering a direct connection to the spiritual and horticultural lives of the women who lived and prayed there centuries ago. Number 8. Metiville, Europe, reborn in a New York oasis. This one is a bit of a journey, not just back in time, but across the Atlantic to New York City. The Cloisters Museum and Gardens, a branch of the Metropolitan Museum of Art, is like a medieval European monastery magically transported to a hilltop overlooking the Hudson River. It's constructed from actual architectural elements of several European medieval monastic sites, dating from the 12th to the 15th centuries. And its gardens are not just pretty additions. They are meticulously researched and recreated medieval gardens. There are 3 main garden spaces here relevant to our theme: the Cuxa Cloister Garden, the Bonnefont Cloister Herb Garden, and the Tree Cloister Garden. While the cloisters wasn't a functioning convent itself, its gardens are based on plants known and cultivated in medieval Europe, including in convents. The Bonnefont Garden is particularly fascinating for anyone interested in convent life. It's laid out as a medieval physic garden with over 250 species of plants that were used for medicine, cooking, art, and magic during the Middle Ages. Nuns would have been intimately familiar with such a garden. They'd cultivate plants like comfrey, whose roots and leaves were made into poultices for bruises and broken bones. Its old name was knitbone. They grew woad for blue dye, vital for textiles and manuscript illumination, and madder for red. The Cuxa Cloister, with its central fountain and symmetrical layout, evokes the contemplative gardens found in monastic settings. Here, you might find plants chosen for their fragrance and symbolic meaning, like lilies representing purity, or columbines symbolizing the Holy Spirit. Walking through these gardens, you're surrounded by plants that Hildegard von Bingen might have written about, or that nuns in a French or Spanish convent would have harvested daily. The information provided is incredibly detailed, drawing from medieval herbals, poems, and household accounts. It's a living library of medieval botany, and because it's designed to be historically accurate, it gives an unparalleled glimpse into the sights, smells, and practicalities of a medieval monastic garden, the kind that would have been the heart of any self-sufficient nunnery. Number 7. The Royal Abbey, where nuns ruled and gardens flourished. The Royal Abbey of Fontefraud, in France's Loire Valley, is a truly unique place. Founded in 1101 by Robert of Arbrissel, it was a double monastery, home to both monks and nuns of the Order of Fontefraud. And here's the kicker: the abbess was the head of the entire order, including the male monks. This was highly unusual and made Fontefraud incredibly powerful, often led by abbesses from royal or noble families. Eleanor of Aquitaine, one of history's most formidable queens, chose to be buried here, as did King Henry II of England and their son, King Richard the Lionheart. With such a significant community, including a large number of nuns, gardens were essential. While the original medieval gardens have undergone transformations over the centuries, Fontefraud was later turned into a prison, believe it or not, before its restoration. Modern efforts have sought to bring back the spirit of its monastic past. There are several garden spaces within the vast complex. The Saint-Benoît Priory, which housed the nuns, would have had its own cloister garden, physic garden, and kitchen plots. The recent recreations include a contemporary take on a medieval-inspired physic garden featuring around 100 species of medicinal plants known in the Middle Ages. Imagine the nuns of Fontefraud, women of often high birth and education, overseeing the cultivation of these vital resources. They would have needed herbs for the infirmary, vegetables and fruits for the refectory, and flowers for the altar. Plants like angelica, whose stems could be candied or used to flavor liqueurs, and was believed to ward off plague, would have been grown. Fennel, dill, and parsley for culinary uses, and perhaps hops for brewing ale. The gardens also served a symbolic purpose, reflecting order, harmony, and the bounty of God's creation. Visiting Fontefraud today, you can wander through these reimagined spaces, reflecting on the powerful women who once walked these grounds managing not just a spiritual community but a large agricultural and economic enterprise with gardens at its core. The scale of the abbey itself hints at the sophistication and organizational skills required, and gardens were an integral part of that system. Number 6. St. Bridget's Sanctuary and its northern gardens. Let's travel north to Vadstena, Sweden, to the site of Vadstena Abbey. This was the mother house of the Birgittine order, founded by St. Bridget of Sweden in the 14th century. St. Bridget was another powerhouse medieval woman, a mystic, visionary, and founder of a new religious order. Her revelations were hugely influential across Europe. Vadstena Abbey was also a double monastery, with separate communities of nuns and monks, but with the abbess holding overall authority is similar to Fontevraud. The Birgittine nuns were known for their devotion to study and prayer, and their daily life was strictly regulated. Gardens would have been crucial for their self-sufficiency and for their medicinal needs. While the original gardens have changed over time, parts of the abbey are now a hotel and museum, there's a dedicated herb garden, Orta garden, maintained in the spirit of the medieval monastic tradition. This garden cultivates plants that would have been common in Swedish medieval monasteries, including those likely grown by the Birgittine nuns. You'd find hardy herbs suited to the northern climate, like lovage, which was used as a vegetable, a medicinal herb, and even a deodorant. Hyssop, often mentioned in the Bible and used for purification rites, would have been present alongside culinary staples like onions, leeks, and various cabbages. The Birgittine rules specified aspects of the nuns' lives, and while it might not have detailed garden layouts, the principles of simplicity, utility, and enclosure would have shaped their green spaces. The herb garden at Vadstena today serves as an educational resource, showing visitors the types of plants that sustained monastic communities in Scandinavia. It's a reminder that even in colder climates, nuns developed sophisticated horticultural practices. The garden provides a tranquil space for reflection, echoing the contemplative atmosphere that St. Bridget sought to create for her order. Standing there, you can imagine the nuns tending their plots, the scent of herbs mixing with the cool Swedish air, their lives dedicated to God and sustained by the earth they cultivated. Number 5. Tapestries and time capsules at Kloster Wienhausen. In Lower Saxony, Germany, lies Kloster Wienhausen, a former Cistercian nunnery founded around 1230. What makes Wienhausen particularly special is its continuous history as a women's religious community. It became a Lutheran Damenstift, or Protestant convent, after the Reformation, and the incredible preservation of its medieval art and buildings. Among its treasures are famous 14th century tapestries, some of which depict scenes that include garden elements, giving us visual clues about their horticultural world. The gardens at Wienhausen today aim to reflect its long history. While not unchanged since the medieval period, the layout and spirit of monastic gardening are maintained. There would have been the typical cloister garth for contemplation, a physic garden for the infirmary, and kitchen gardens for sustenance. The Cistercian order emphasized manual labor as part of spiritual life, so the nuns themselves would have been actively involved in garden work. They would have cultivated plants like calendula, not just for its pretty orange flowers, but for its medicinal use in salves and as a dye, chamomile for calming teas, sage as a general healer, and various mints for digestion and flavor would have been staples. The Wienhausen tapestries, depicting stories like the legend of Tristan and Isolde or religious scenes, sometimes feature stylized trees, flowers, and trellises. These artistic representations combined with archaeological evidence and historical documents from similar Cistercian nunneries, help inform the understanding and presentation of the gardens today. Walking through the grounds of Kloster Beenhausen, with its ancient brick buildings and serene atmosphere, you can almost hear the rustle of habits and the murmur of prayers. The gardens, whether directly surviving in their exact medieval form or carefully hybrided to represent that heritage, are an integral part of this immersive historical experience. They speak of a continuous tradition of female spirituality and stewardship of the land, a legacy preserved through centuries of change. Number 4. Where medieval mystics found God in nature. Klosterhälfte, near Eibingen in Germany, has an extraordinary spiritual heritage. In the 13th century, it was a flourishing Cistercian nunnery and a center of female mysticism, home to remarkable women like Gertrude the Great, Mechthild of Magdeburg, and Mechthild of Hackeborn. These nuns were profound writers and theologians whose mystical experiences often drew on imagery from the natural world, including gardens. For them, a garden wasn't just a place to grow food. It was a metaphor for the soul, a place to encounter the divine. The medieval monastery at Helfte was dissolved in the 16th century, but in 1999, Cistercian nuns returned and re-established a community there. As part of this revival, gardens have been created that reflect the spirit and traditions of Helfte's golden age. While these are modern recreations, they are deeply informed by the writings of Helfte's mystics and the principles of Cistercian monastic gardening. Gertrude the Great, for instance, often used metaphors of flowers, plants, and cultivation in her spiritual writings, describing Christ as a beautiful flower or the soul as a garden tended by God. The new gardens at Helfte include herb gardens with medicinal and culinary plants that would have been known to Gertrude and her sisters. They might have cultivated roses, lilies, violets, and columbines, not only for their practical uses, rose petals for rose water, violet leaves for poultices, but also for their rich symbolism. Lilies represented purity, roses, love, both divine and human, and violets, humility. The act of gardening itself was a form of prayer and labor, connecting the nuns to the rhythms of nature and the divine order. Visiting Helfte today, with its blend of ancient ruins, restored buildings, and newly planted gardens, offers a chance to connect with this powerful tradition of female spirituality, where the cultivation of the earth and the cultivation of the soul were intimately linked. The gardens are a living testament to the enduring legacy of Helfte's mystics. Number 3. The Royal Nunnery and its powerful cloisters. In Burgos, Spain, stands the Monasterio de Santa Maria la Real de las Huelgas, commonly known as Las Huelgas. This was no ordinary nunnery. Founded around 1187 by King Alfonso, the Eighth of Castile, and Queen Eleanor of England, daughter of Henry II and Eleanor of Aquitaine, linking it distantly to Fontevraud. Las Huelgas was an immensely powerful and wealthy Cistercian abbey for noblewomen. Its abbess held vast feudal powers, effectively ruling over towns and villages, and was second only to the queen in status. Within the formidable walls of Las Huelgas, the nuns lived lives of prayer, contemplation, and significant administrative responsibility. The complex includes several cloisters, and these would have been the primary garden spaces accessible to the enclosed nuns. The claustrillas, or little cloister, is one of the oldest parts, a beautiful example of Romanesque architecture. Its central open area would have been a garden, a hortus conclusus, enclosed garden, symbolizing paradise and providing a space for quiet reflection away from worldly cares. Here, the nuns would have cultivated plants that were both useful and symbolic. Fragrant herbs like lavender and rosemary would perfume the air, while medicinal plants like sage and thyme would be readily available for the infirmary. Roses, lilies, and irises, with their deep Christian symbolism, would have adorned these sacred spaces. The Cistercian order emphasized simplicity and austerity. So while the abbey itself was grand due to its royal patronage, the gardens would have been practical and orderly rather than overly ornate. They were places of work, providing food and medicine, but also profound spiritual landscapes. Today, Las Huelgas is a Spanish national heritage site. While modern upkeep shapes the gardens, the ancient stones of the cloisters and the enduring layout speak volumes about the lives of the powerful noblewomen who dedicated themselves to God within these walls. Walking through these cloisters, you are treading on ground that witnessed centuries of female monastic life, where the rhythms of prayer were interwoven with the rhythms of planting and harvesting. Number 2. St. Clare's Simple Garden of Faith in Assisi. San Damiano, just outside the walls of Assisi, Italy, holds a special place in Franciscan history. This is the humble church where St. Francis of Assisi heard the crucifix speak to him, telling him to repair my house. Later, San Damiano became the first monastery of the Order of Poor Ladies, founded by St. Clare of Assisi, a devoted follower of Francis. St. Clare and her companions lived a life of radical poverty, prayer, and manual labor here for over 40 years, from around 1212. The garden at San Damiano would have reflected this ethos of poverty and simplicity. It wouldn't have been a grand ornamental space, but a functional kitchen garden, orto, and perhaps a small herb plot, essential for the nuns' survival as they relied on charity and what they could produce themselves. Clare herself was known for her humility and her dedication to manual work, which would have included tending the garden. They would have grown basic vegetables like beans, onions, cabbages, and leafy greens. Herbs like parsley, basil, and oregano for their simple meals, and perhaps a few medicinal plants like chamomile or calendula for common ailments. The cloister at San Damiano is small and rustic, and the adjacent garden space, though likely changed over the centuries, still evokes a sense of peace and unadorned utility. There's a story that when Pope Gregory IX visited Clare at San Damiano and saw their extreme poverty, he offered to release her from her vow of poverty. Clare steadfastly refused. This commitment to simplicity would have extended to their garden. It was a space that directly sustained their lives, a place where they lived out their commitment to Lady Poverty. Visiting San Damiano today, you can see the tiny dormitory where Clare slept, the choir where the nuns prayed, and the small, unpretentious garden areas. It offers a profound contrast to the grander monastic gardens elsewhere, providing a glimpse into a life where the cultivation of a few essential plants was an act of faith and a means of survival for a community of women dedicated to an austere spiritual path. The beauty here is in its simplicity and its direct connection to the lives of St. Clare and her first followers. Number 1. The English Nunnery Ruins, Whispering Garden Secrets. The ruins of Godstow Abbey, nestled by the River Thames near Oxford, England, are hauntingly beautiful. Founded in the 12th century, it was a Benedictine nunnery, and for a time, a very famous one, as it was the chosen burial place of Rosamund Clifford, the renowned mistress of King Henry II. Though now largely ruins after the dissolution of the monasteries in the 16th century, the layout of the site still allows us to imagine the life and the gardens that once thrived here. Like all Benedictine communities, the nuns of Godstow would have valued self-sufficiency and manual labor. Their precinct would have included extensive gardens. There would have been a cloistered garth, the spiritual heart of the nunnery, likely planted with symbolic flowers and fragrant herbs. Beyond this, there would have been a larger kitchen garden providing vegetables and fruits for the community, an infirmary's garden stocked with medicinal plants, and possibly an orchard. The proximity to the river would have been beneficial for irrigation. Records from other Benedictine houses suggest a wide variety of plants. Nuns would have cultivated essentials like leeks, onions, peas, and beans. Apples, pears, and plums from the orchard would be crucial for winter stores. The infirmary would have relied on herbs like fennel for digestion, comfrey for wounds, and wormwood as a bitter tonic. While you won't find manicured flower beds today, walking among the weathered stones of Godstow, you can trace the outlines of former buildings and imagine the green spaces that surrounded them. Archaeological investigations and historical research on similar sites help paint a picture of these lost gardens. The remaining walls of the chapel and other structures stand as silent witnesses to the daily lives of the nuns. The beauty of Godstow's garden now lies in its evocative atmosphere, the way nature has reclaimed the site and the tangible connection to a community of women whose lives were rooted in this very soil. It's a place that prompts reflection on the cyclical nature of life, growth, decay, and remembrance, much like the gardens the nuns themselves would have tended through the changing seasons. The whispers of their horticultural efforts are carried on the wind through the remaining arches and scattered stones.